Well, before you put the clutch on, you're supposed to align the engine to top dead center, which means on cylinder 1 or cylinder 4, you want to get the piston up to its maximum height. And you can do that by just turning the crankshaft. I've got a socket that happens to fit. And I'm just using a nail here. You can see that I marked on the nail. Just by turning this, I could tell. So, for example, if I keep going, you know, the nail goes way down in there. And I can see, oh, well, that's kind of a barbaric way to do it, but it does work. Could use a straw, a nail, or something that just isn't going to fall into the engine compartment. Okay, so basically I just kept turning this until the nail was at its maximum height. So now you can see it's really low. Here it starts coming up. And that's sort of the maximum height that the nail could go. And then I marked it with a Sharpie. So I know that that's top dead center. That's the barbaric way to do it. There's other ways. If you look closely at the crankshaft, there are markers here. There's 5 little rivets that show you where top dead center is. But what I had trouble is finding the mark on the actual crank pulley. It's there, but it's really hard to see. What I intended to do was just back it off a little bit, and then I used this hacksaw blade to make that mark just a little bit more clear. There's going to be a similar mark on the flywheel. So that mark, not really well, documented. But essentially, when I put that at, say, mark 1 or 2 on here, I know that the engine is at top dead center. Another very sophisticated way is to buy one of these endoscopes. So this is a tool with a camera on the end, and you can actually put that camera down inside the cylinder and see the condition of the piston. You see that one's a little bit dirty. And you can tell when it's at top dead center because the piston is at the maximum height. In fact, if I push it too far, it just hits the piston. So there's a visual way of seeing the piston. I didn't actually find this very helpful for this job, for finding top dead center, but I'm sure this scope will come in handy. So according to the manual and some other experts, the reason you want this set to top dead center is that you want this flywheel to be only put on one way. Apparently it's balanced and it offsets some of the vibration that would cause by a 4-cylinder engine. They talk about there being a mark somewhere on this flywheel for top dead center, but I looked at that flywheel backwards and forwards. I could not see the mark. I don't know if this flywheel just doesn't have one. Well, now that I say that, I think I see it right there. How about that? There is a mark right there, tiny as can be. But as it turns out, if you look closely at the pattern for mounting this flywheel, there's a pin and 2 holes on either side of it. And that matches up with these holes on the flywheel. It's the only place on the flywheel that you've got 3 holes all in a row. So it's pretty hard to mess up. I can't see any way of putting that flywheel on and hitting the pin any other way. It looks like it only goes on one way. And now that I see that top dead center mark, I know that I'm close. So let's try putting it on. Okay, that's approximately where it needs to go, and sure enough, that top dead center mark is right here. So we must be accurate, but I don't think it, like I say, I don't think it really matters, is because it looks like there's only one way for that flywheel to go on. I'm going to give that flywheel a little encouragement just before I put the bolts on. So I'm just going to, got a rubber hammer here. I can hear it hitting the metal, so I know it's all the way on. Now the bolts that go in there, I bought new bolts, and they're pretty straightforward. In some videos, I've seen a metal plate goes in here with tabs that fold over onto the heads of those bolts to stop them from coming undone. This flywheel didn't come with one, and I'm not sure if my car ever had one. So I'm going to use some Loctite when I put in all those bolts, just to make sure that they don't come undone. Okay, I've got the Loctite here. I'm just going to cut off the end. Ah, it's way harder than I thought. Well, you can tell when it's coming out because it's red. Oh, I really made a mess of the floor. I'm going to have to wipe that up. And I'll just start putting these in. Hopefully that doesn't dry too quickly. And then I have my wrench here. And then if I'm not mistaken, these bolts are going to be torqued at 65 foot-pounds. But to do that, we need to stop the flywheel from moving around. So we're going to use vice grips or something to hold the flywheel so it doesn't move. All right, in order to stop the flywheel from moving, I've got 2 pairs of vice grips on here. This set is actually through the starter hole, so there's something to lean against. And this one is just putting pressure against the back plate. And I've got my torque wrench set to 65 inch-pounds. Inch-pounds. Is it supposed to be inch-pounds or foot-pounds? Put that on the nuts and just crank them up. And it should click when I hit the right torque. After you have the flywheel firmly attached and torqued correctly, the next step is to put on the clutch plate. And to do that, it's best to have one of these clutch alignment tools. You can get these for under 10 bucks, but essentially it aligns with the spline of the clutch plate and the center of the flywheel. So you put that in place, and then you're going to put on the pressure plate. And this is going to stick out initially when you put it on while you line up the bolts. And there are 3 pins on the flywheel to help you get this aligned. Last step here is to put the clutch pressure plate on, and this is a bit tricky to align. I had a lot of trouble just sort of figuring out which holes the pins go in and where the bolts go. Just a little bit tricky to get it started because you have to push in on the springs. Well, I'm thinking maybe stop this from rolling somehow. All right, try this again. I think I got the right size this time. So, aligning the pressure plate to the pins is a little bit tricky. Getting that first bolt in. Nope. Okay. So one challenge in getting the pressure plate put on is it's a lot easier to have 2 people. Someone to hold it up while the other one puts in the bolts. And you're putting pressure on the engine, which causes it to roll. So you see here, I can get the pressure plate lined up, holding it with one hand, and getting a bolt on there. So I think I'm going to use some vice grips as a shortcut because I'm by myself. Okay, with the help of some vice grips, and I had to put a nut inside my socket because it was letting these bolts go too deep and I could not get them in the hole. There you go. That's how you do it. Got to tighten it up a little bit more, and of course there's pressure now on the plate as you tighten up those bolts. And there you have it. You've got the pressure plate on with all the bolts, and the clutch plate is still lined up. You're ready to connect that to the gearbox.